Servant leadership means that you use your power, your authority, and your access to get under and fight for the highest good of those around you and under you to fulfill their destiny by laying down your own life or sacrificing what you could use your power, authority, and your access to get for yourself. You use it to lift others up and you give it to others. And in that, you become a servant of everyone around you. The higher you go in the kingdom in terms of position and authority, the lower you go in serving.
Thank you for watching the MAPS Global Podcast, where we discuss leadership and culture within the convergence of worship, prayer, and missions in your neighborhood and in the nations.
Wow. Hi. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MAPS Global Podcast.
Let's go.
Ari is very excited to be in this podcast today. It might also be we're revving ourselves up.
Revving us up. Let's go.
We're also getting some excitement into our bones.
Back
right
in
now.
the basement.
Yeah, we are back in the basement.
Back in the basement.
And we're excited to be here. We're always happy to be here. I think. Right?
Always happy to be
Always
here.
happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. So we're back and we are currently doing a series. Before we actually do all of that, if you are tuning in for the first time, I am Mimi. And hello. And this right here is R.A. Martinez, father, son.
Brother, husband.
Yes, that's what I was
Friend.
getting to. Friend, lover, you know.
I am a lover.
Yeah,
I am a lover
many
of
things.
one.
But not a myth.
Or a legend.
Forever the
Just
legend.
a man.
No, well, you know, doing the best that he can.
She's done what she could.
Yeah, doing the best that he can, as are we. So anyways, welcome you guys. And
That's
it's
my
good to-
epitaph, by the way. You've heard me say this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right there, right on the gravestone. Here lies R.A. Martinez.
He did the
He
best.
did what he could.
Oh man, that's all that we can really ask.
That's all you
Just
can
do
do.
The best that we
Just
absolutely
do the
can.
best in the grace of God.
Amen. Hallelujah. So we are in a
Hey,
series.
And that's all the Lord wants from you too.
The best that you can do.
That you can do.
Just bring the best that you can do.
Just bring your whole heart.
Wow.
All right. Amen.
Just
now
got
that we've
past
pastored
it.
that.
Just got past it right now. So we're in a series right now. We're doing a series.
Excellence starts with the wholeness of your heart in the offering, not in the skill of your hands.
Wow.
All right.
Thank you. That's actually really powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Really, really helpful. So, you know, when he's not pastoring people, he's actually also raising up leaders.
That's true. That's true.
Which may be one and the same.
We've got a dozen or so in our leadership track right now in our MAPS Global School.
Yeah, amazing group
Incredible.
of leaders. So we're excited about that. But
In our spring school.
yes, MGS, one school, 3 tracks. We are in a series right now talking about our non-negotiables. So at MAPS Global, part of our culture, who we are, we have non-negotiables.
That's right.
And we have 4 non-negotiables. And last episode, we spoke about one of them, which was joy, and is joy and the enjoyment of life. So
Killed it. That's right.
if you have not listened to that one yet, go ahead and have a listen. And today we're going
It's
to...
joy and the enjoyment of life because it's not an abstract joy, it's an experiential
Yes,
joy. Yes,
absolutely. It's really, it was really powerful, and I think it'll be
was fun.
helpful. It was really fun to do. And so we've got 4, joy and the enjoyment of life. We've got presence of God.
That's right. Which is the first one, but just in no particular order.
Yes.
Yeah.
Presence of God.
Mhm.
We've
And
got...
we have metrics for that one.
Yes.
Yes, which we'll do a podcast on that.
Right, it's still coming. We then have personal growth.
Yep, and development.
Personal growth and development. And then we have servant leadership.
Yeah, great job.
Right. So today we are talking about servant leadership.
Yes.
You know, this is one of our non-negotiables. And if you guys know anything,
And they're non-negotiable because they're not
up for negotiation.
That's right.
It's not up for
That's right.
discussion.
This is not.
It's not up for
Hey,
compromise.
Hey, what
It's-
do you think? Should we do that? No,
Yes.
the way some people, other organizations, they would use the word strategic anchor. basically what it is in everything we do, if one of these is not present, we pause what we're doing and we go back and get this before we move forward.
Yes.
And so we're constantly measuring and evaluating in a good way, not in a comparison way, but in a good way. We're constantly taking the temperature on whether joy, presence, development, people are developing and taking personal responsibility for their development, and servant leadership is in the ethos, in the pathos, of MAPS. And if it's not, we pause, we go back and get it, and then we keep moving forward.
Okay, before we move forward, what's a pathos?
Yeah, so ethos is, these are two words. This is a whole other podcast.
He likes being fancy, and then it's just like,
I'm trying to keep up with you.
No, that's not true.
I practiced some big words for the podcast for you.
No, that's not true.
I did. Ethos and pathos. Ethos is the farthest extent of something in which the influence touches something. So it's the sense of being influenced by it.
Okay.
So the ethos of MAPS is anywhere that the shade and the influence and the messaging and the culture MAPS is touching. So it's very, very broad. Pathos is the sense of belonging to or being under or a part of it. And so that's smaller. It's not just being touched by it, but it's the experience of someone going, no, actually, I belong to that family. I'm a part of the pathos of that family. So the ethos is the extent of reach. The pathos is the sense of belonging.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And they're two different things.
I have not heard you use pathos before.
I've done it a culture meeting probably before you were here, and this is reminding me that I need to go back.
Yes. So this is a discussion that we've been having, which is we've grown so much over the last 3 years.
So quickly. Yeah.
So quickly that there are teachings that were taught in our culture meetings at the beginning of MAPS Global, and even just like 5
almost
years ago.
ad nauseum that I thought were like, okay, I've done this enough. And then, 3 years later, leaders, I mean, you're up in the executive level of our leadership and going, I've never actually heard you talk about 5 ways to hear the voice of God.
Right.
And I go, no, I talk about that all the time. And you go, no, so it's just it's a part of the work you have to do to sustain and manage exponential growth, is you have to keep saying the same things over and over because there's constantly people assimilating into the culture. So
he is still developing us as leaders. I want to say that even in
constantly,
our translation of who we are as MAPS Global. So as
very
we
much
sit
so, yes,
in on the leadership sphere, and even as we welcome new people, as we welcome new students into our pathos.
Yes.
Right. There is a necessity to repeat some of the things that have been said before, so that we are all speaking the same
because
language.
Culture, exactly. Culture is the language and behavior of the leadership.
Yeah.
And so part of a culture creator, which is what part of my job here, is that I have to say the same thing over and over and over and over and over 1,000 times, and try to find fresh ways to say the same thing over and over and over again, so that we're all using the same language. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. So
Non Negotiables is part of our language.
Right.
And what's cool, exciting, I think I said this to you before we started, is it's been a minute since I've taught on our Non Negotiables.
Right.
And so that's why we're doing it on podcast, and we're going to sprinkle it into our culture meeting, which is our global staff meeting. And so I was excited just knowing today. I saw my schedule this morning when I woke up, and it said this podcast. I went, oh, this is exciting. I haven't talked about this in a minute.
Yes.
But it's so dear to us because we put it in the foundation of MAPS. So, yeah.
And we're seeing it too. I just want to say, like, it is being done and we are seeing it. There just hasn't been a formalized teaching on it in a while. So this is really exciting for me as well. So let's get into it. The podcast today is servant leadership.
Yes.
Right?
The non-negotiable servant
non-negotiable servant leadership. So Randy, what is servant leadership? Like, how do we define it?
Yeah, it's great. And I'm going to give you a way oversimplistic answer.
Okay.
And then we'll take the next hour to tease it out. Ready? Here's the definition of the servant leadership. Jesus' model of leadership.
Right.
Period. If we're in agreement that Jesus is the best leader, he's the greatest leader that's ever lived and ever will live. He's the King of Kings, right?
Lord
of all the kings, he's the king of them all. Yeah. He's the most wise. He's the most tactical. He's the most empathetic. He's the most compassionate. He's the most just. He's the most merciful, all at the same time decision maker and leader and carer of people. He's both the shepherd.
Right.
He's not only just the shepherd of the global church. David said he's my shepherd, and he's also king.
Yeah.
So he's also priest. He's excellent in all the offices. He's the most excellent in all of the offices.
The fivefold ministry.
No, that's actually a really important point. That's another podcast. But because he fulfilled all the governmental offices of Israel, then he gave offices into the church that are a reflection of his leadership. And that's a great podcast to have one day, but not today. But he's the most excellent in all the offices or leadership roles that he's in. And Jesus was not ambiguous, ethereal, or confusing about his value system, his model, and his style of leadership.
It's good.
He was explicit about it, and I want to use the word demanded because I think that it's appropriate. He demanded that this model, value system model, and style be replicated in any leader that would represent him to the church and to the world. And that's the 25 Bible verses we could talk about today.
Yeah.
And so what is servant leadership? It's leading like Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Period. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in today.
I hope that helps you.
Yeah, that is actually helpful.
Yep.
But so you say that he demands it. How does he demand it?
Yeah, so here's where we'll get into it. Matthew 20. Matthew 20 and John 13. I just want to pull from those two things today. Matthew 20 parallels in Mark 10, I believe. Jesus is responding. He's actually on his way up to Jerusalem. So the context is really, really important. He's on his way up to Jerusalem. He's told his leadership team, which is the 12 disciples.
Right.
Then he's got the 3 that are in his close circle, James, John, and Peter. Then he's got 70 that are kind of around him. Then he's got 500 that are all part of like the caravan of Jesus. And then he's got multitudes. So he's talking to the 12 right now. And they're on their way up to Jerusalem. He's told them explicitly 3 times that why he's going to Jerusalem. First time he said it was in Matthew 16 after the epiphany of Peter. He said, the Son of Man is going to Jerusalem to be handed over by the chief priests and scribes, to be crucified, and on the 3rd day he will rise again. And Peter said, no, Lord, that's a bad ministry plan. I rebuke you in your name, right? And we all know how that went for Peter. And in fairness to Peter, I don't want to rabbit trail too much on that, but in fairness to Peter couldn't make sense of how that plan, Jesus crucified and buried, matched with the statement he just made, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Because you are the Christ, Matthew 16, that statement, he wasn't saying Jesus' last name, because Jesus' last name is not Christ. He was saying Jesus' mission, his role as Messiah. That Christ is the Greek word for Messiah, meaning you're going to fulfill all the passages in the prophets that have to do with a man sitting on David's throne in Jerusalem, reigning over the whole earth, all the governments coming under your under submission to you, your authority, and you restoring the Garden of Eden on earth. And then Jesus in the next conversation said, hey, I'm going to the cross. And Peter said, that doesn't make sense. But that starts us on the road of what's in Jesus' mind when he thinks about how he uses his authority or his leadership. So he tells the disciples 2 more times before we get to Matthew 20, I am going to the cross.
Yeah.
And they it doesn't, I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this problem when Jesus starts talking to you about things that are not in your ministry plan, you have a hard time hearing him.
Yes.
All of a sudden it's like, no, that's not what was in the plan. Here's my vision statement. So Jesus, like, I can't hear you right now because you're not talking to me about what
confirmation bias
what I
we were talking
about. You're not talking about me about what I want you to be talking to me about. And so literally as he's coming up to Jerusalem, he's about to Palm Sunday, which we're coming up with here in about a month. He's about to march into the city. He's about to initiate Passion Week, and they're standing outside the city, and James and John, they get their mom. This is just the politics in this are fascinating. They didn't have the guts to come ask Jesus themselves, so they sent their mom.
Makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like,
They're like, Mom, there's no way he's gonna say no to Mom.
he was also a weird brother. I mean, I love him, but he was like in the synagogue at 12.
Oh, Jesus,
Jesus,
yeah, to his own mother,
Right,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And so this is James and John. This is another mother, and so they're like, hey, let's send Mom, because there's no way he's gonna say no to our mom. Like, she's so like sweet, but also passive aggressive, and also like it's like, and so they send their mom to Jesus in Matthew 20:21, and he says, what do you want? And she says, say it, commit, say that the 2 sons of mine will sit on your right hand and your left hand in your kingdom. And what a request.
yeah.
They basically sent Mom to try to secure the 2 most prominent leadership positions when Jesus sits on David's throne and restores the earth, right hand and left hand. James and John, my boys. My boys, they're the best. They
deserve that.
They deserve this. Yeah. Jesus, you know everything they've gone through, and they're just, they've never done anything wrong, And Jesus looks back at her and says, you don't know what you're asking. Yeah. You have no idea what you're asking me right now. And then he says to James and John, are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? And this is how you know that they're completely out of touch with the reality. They look back at Jesus and they go, for sure, give it to us. Yeah. We're totally able to drink the cup. Yeah. Like, okay. And this is where Jesus goes into his teaching on leadership and apostleship and in the kingdom, because he's realizing how out of touch they are with his value system, his method, and his style of leadership. Because they just requested to sit in the most 2 prominent positions, and they think for sure we can drink the cup. They're thinking cup of power. Right. He's talking about the cup of suffering. And so he goes, yeah, you will drink that cup. But where people are positioned when I enter into the kingdom, that's for the Father to decide. He's already prepared that. So look at this, verse 24. When the 10 heard it, can you imagine, Bartholomew, can you imagine being like one of the 10, listening, first watching?
The audacity of the
James and John send their mom. Like, somebody should have pulled out the red flag. Can we in the review booth? Yeah. This is illegal. Like, you can't send your mom to lobby Jesus. And then they're all like, we can drink the cup, And Bartholomew's like, what the? Yeah. We know, James, we know you. You're just a nerd like us, Like, what do you mean you can drink the cup and sit at the right hand? And so they get offended at them. Yeah. Because they're lobbying. What you're seeing here is lobbying for position. This is politicking. Well. This is later what James, the brother of Jesus, not this James, says in James 3 about the wisdom from below that's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. It has this politicking to it. And so he says this, verse 25, and here's where we'll camp for a minute. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles, rulers are people in positions of authority. It's a very general word. It means those who carry weight. The rulers of the Gentiles, they lord it over them, their position of power. They lord it over. The key word is over, over. And the great ones exercise authority over them. Them is the people, the Gentiles. Verse 26. It shall not be so among you. And right here, Jesus is about to introduce us to a leadership value system, a leadership posture of heart, a leadership style that doesn't parallel, it doesn't share principles with worldly leadership. It's in direct opposition to it. He doesn't say, the ruler of the Gentiles, they lord over, they establish themselves, they self-promote and establish positions of power, and they rule over it. And some of it, we'll borrow some of it. I'm going to just encourage you with a few things here. He goes, none of that is for you. None of that is for you. But whoever would want to be, and the Greek word here is mega. That's cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whoever wants to be megas, great, among you must first be your servant. And whoever would be protos first, and we'll get to what that means, among you must first be your slave, doulos. That's the bondservants, the ones that were purchased from the market and lifelong indentured servitude. I do this because they were pierced in the ear to show that they belong to a master. He says, if you want to be mega, you got to be a servant. And if you want to be protos, that's where we get the word prototype. You want to be the example. You want to be first. You want to be the one out front. Then you've got to be a doulos, a bondservant, a lifelong experience of servitude to another. Even as the Son of Man. Now, pause. I know everybody, you guys watch this, you love your Bible, Bible students. Whenever Jesus uses the term Son of Man, this is really important for this passage. Whenever he uses the word term Son of Man, he's not saying, I am human. I'm a man. You'll notice in some Bibles, ESV, it has it capitalized, Son of Man. It's because Jesus, and this is actually the most used ascription that Jesus had of himself. He used this more than anything else. When he says the Son of Man, he's referencing Daniel chapter 7, when the Ancient of Days, the courtroom in heaven is set up, and then one like the Son of Man comes before the Ancient of Days and is given all dominion and authority and power over all peoples. So he's saying, even as the Daniel 7 Son of Man, who's going to receive all the authority and power in the kingdom and, over the globe, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus modeled perfect leadership by modeling what to do with authority when it's given to you.
Wow.
And what Jesus, in his confidence and in his knowing of his authority, he didn't say, even as weak little old me, he said, even as the Son of Man. And we'll get to it in John 13. It says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given him all things, took the towel and washed it. And so it's not a servant leadership. This is really important. It's not a false humility or a self-deprecation. It's a confidence and identity, and it's a confidence that you have real authority that leads you not to go over people, but to come under.
Slowly.
Yeah, to come under. And so the rulers of the Gentiles, people in powerful positions in the world, they get there by politicking, manipulating. They get there, and then they exercise their authority by pushing down people and crushing, and in the most extreme cases, oppressing people under them. And when you think rulers, don't just think presidents and kings. Think people in positions of power.
Right.
Pastors. Businessmen. They get into these positions, and then they use their authority and their position to lord over or to push down or to keep themselves on top. And they use the resources and the activity and the access they have in their power to keep themselves on top. And twice Jesus says they use it over them, but not so among you. Leaders, servant leadership is, you asked me, what's the definition? I said Jesus. So now let me give you a more fuller definition. Servant leadership means that you use your power, your authority, and your access to get under and fight for the highest good of those around you and under you, to fulfill their destiny by laying down your own life or sacrificing what you could use your power, authority, and your access to get for yourself. You use it to lift others up, and you give it to others. And in that, you become a servant of everyone around you. the higher you go in the kingdom in terms of position and authority, the lower you go in serving those around you. And a little phrase we use in MAPS is servant leadership. What does it mean? It means there's no job in the organization that's below the top leader.
Yes.
Right? Because the top leader is the chief servant,
Right.
the servant of all. Because the top leader, in this case for MAPS Me, is to model and replicate the leadership culture that Jesus set with his disciples. You want to be mega? I want to be mega, which means big.
Mm-hmm.
Mega, that word, great, it means, it could mean big mass, it could be big in influence, it could be big in intensity, the great, everything in rank, belonging. You want to be the biggest, most prominent.
Yeah, it has prominence regardless of like.
It's prominence, actually,
And
NASB says whoever wants to be prominent among you must first be your servant. You want to be prominent? When heaven looks at your leadership, you want prominence in heaven, go hidden and low, which means you're fighting for others, for their name, for their greatness, not for your own name and your own greatness.
Wow.
Even as the Son of Man. So it's like, well, that's Jesus's. And then he says, you want to be first, prototype. You want to be the example. You want to be out front. You want to be the general leading the army, then get behind the army and make sure everybody's back is covered as they go in. It's the complete reversal. It's the upside down part of the kingdom. And let me say this before we get to John 13. You can ask questions, but I find this, this is a whole, sermon series, so we're packing it in. But I do find that we've been, especially in the last 20 years, and then it's become really popular in the last 15. And it's helpful. It's been helpful to me, but only with the right perspective and foundation in place. There's been a huge surge in enthusiasm in the church world and church leaders to go into the business world and go into the technological world and go into the political world and learn from leaders.
Yes.
How do we build something successful in here that looks successful out there? And so don't get me wrong, because I don't have a bad attitude about it. I actually listen to some of these guys and I take principles.
Yes.
But we have to be careful that we're not taking that value system when we're taking those principles. That we're actually taking those principles, but then we're implementing them into a value system that's completely turned upside down, where if I'm the leader, I'm the lowest one.
Right.
If I'm the leader, I'm the one that's laying my life down at the lowest part. I'm the servant, the doulos. Paul actually, in 1 Corinthians 4, this is the under row. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
He says, 1 Corinthians 4, he says, you should regard us as men sentenced to death, as last of all. And then he says this phrase, 1 Corinthians 4, I think I wrote it down. Here it is. I think that God has exhibited us apostles as last of all. What are you talking about? Apostles, you're supposed to be first. You're the first one mentioned in the fivefold, right? You're out front.
You're the top, yeah.
You're the top. Paul said, first in position means last in privilege. He said, God's exhibited us apostles as last of all, like men sentenced to death.
Well.
Death, why? Because your apostleship, your leadership is laying your life down constantly for others. It's a self-sacrificing death.
It should feel hard.
It's death.
And sacrificial.
It's death. Then he says, a spectacle to the world.
Wow.
In other words, it should our leadership in the church should confuse the world, not because it's got sin and abuse in it, but because it makes no sense with men who have been given power and authority.
Like it's maybe void of glory to the world, or
it should look like lambs, slain lambs, not roaring lions. And that should confuse a world system of power that roars with strength when given position and power and overcomes their enemies, when men and women are giving power and authority in the kingdom, it looks like self-sacrificing lambs who don't open their mouth when they're insulted, when they're crushed.
Yeah.
Spectacle to the world, to angels.
Wow.
Angels go, why are these ones who have been given such glory and power using it in that way?
Mm.
And then he says, 1 Corinthians 1, he says, you should consider us servants. The Greek word there, servants, literally translates under rowers.
Well.
Under rowers. What's an under rower?
Yeah. What is it?
Thanks. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. And this is why, for me, leadership in the kingdom is not a career, it's a calling. Because you don't get into leadership in God's church for money, fame, glory, following, everything that the leaders of the Gentiles get into. You're sovereignly called into it because you're going to be an under rower. What's an under rower? It was the men at the bottom of the ship who rowed together while everybody on top made it to their destiny, and everything from the top came down on them as they rowed. They rowed, R-O-W-E-D. They rowed tirelessly. They laid down their lives and they took all the crap.
Right.
Everything fell on them. They worked day and night so that other people reached their destination.
Yeah. And if the ship should start sinking, they're the ones to go down first.
Yes.
Like they actually felt it first.
The water came in
Yeah.
on them first.
Yeah.
And Paul said, that's how you should consider us, the highest, the apostles. We're the under rowers of the church. I mean, how different is that than some of the modern examples of leadership we're seeing, which are just borrowed from,
Yes.
worldly leadership.
Right.
We see that person, right, and we say, how'd you build your business? That's how I want to build my church.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way because the church is not a business.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think that's the sad thing is that a lot of churches are starting to look like businesses. But you said something so important. You said taking the principles but making sure to filter them through, you didn't say this word, but filtering them through Sermon on the Mount, right?
They have
and
to be
the
built
gospel.
on the
The
non-negotiable servant leadership.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can take the same principle and implement it to self-promote and to secure my position of power and gain followers.
Yes.
You can use the same principle to demote, to get under others and serve them into their destiny.
Yeah.
And so what I see is this, I'll use a strong word.
Sure.
Since we're on a podcast and millions of people will see it.
Why not?
It's like 500 people.
Hey, you're serving us.
I see a lust. I see a lust in church leadership when they look at prominent people in positions of power in the world. I see a lust for it.
Yeah.
And so then they go and they try to grab how they got to positions or fame or wealth.
Yeah.
And then they try to build that structure down into their church. And the church ends up, and here's the result. They're not shepherds. They're hired hands. And the church exists to promote their name, not make disciples. And they end up building businesses.
Right.
But it's at the expense of people.
The sheep.
The sheep, yeah. And that's not like, I don't have anybody in my mind, but I've seen that, especially in the last 20, 30 years, this like, if we get the right business model, it's based on metrics, money and numbers, and we can blow this thing up and it gets really popular, it makes a lot of money. But at the end of the day, is Christ formed in those people?
Yes.
And number two, is your model of leadership servant of all and slave and giving your life, laying your life down for many?
I mean, the way you talk about it.
Are you an under rower?
Yeah. I mean, the way you talk about it too, I just keep asking myself the question, can one, this doesn't sound like something one can or should aspire to. It has to be a calling, right? There has to be a grace on your life to be able to
Yes.
lead this way, right? It's not I aspire to be, it's not an ambition like a career type of ambition, right?
I totally agree.
You know?
Yeah, that's a
The way
long
you
conversation.
sure, I think it's a long conversation, but the way that you talk about it, it
Yeah.
sounds like
The longer I've been in it, I've been in pastoral ministry and leadership for 20 years. The longer I'm in it, the more I'm convinced it's a calling, not a career. And the longer I'm in it, the more I'm convinced that people should do other things if they don't have
Right.
the calling, because it will just, if you're going to be a leader and you want to honor Jesus, your life is going to be double hard.
Yes.
And that's what the New Testament,
That's what the word
that's
seems
what
to
Paul
say.
says. Paul says, men sentenced to death. Spectacles are another word. Another time he's describing the apostolic ministry, he says danger 8 times. And the point is, it's a laid down life.
Yes.
And we all, as Christians, lay our lives down for one another. But there's a cost to leadership. We've so much built the idea of leadership around the opportunity and not
Yes.
the cost.
Yes.
It's an opportunity for me to get my name out there, my message
And
out there, my
gifting.
career, my gifting out
Yeah.
there. When the biblical view of leadership is it's the cost
Yes.
of being the under rower, to be the slave of all, to fight for the highest good of those that God has entrusted to you to be an overseer of their souls.
Wow.
And I tremble a little bit at the models of leadership I'm seeing out there, and the lust in the church for leaders to be like the world. And I look at Matthew 20, and not so among you.
Yeah.
Not so among you.
Yeah. Well, can we read John 13?
Yeah.
And then I really want to chat about how in our ethos, how we are creating a culture and an environment of building leaders that are Matthew 20 type of leaders.
Yeah, totally.
That'd
be great. Yeah. I won't expositely teach on this one. I'll just give you,
Sure.
it's the Last Supper. So it's a week later from Matthew
Great.
20. It's not even a week later. It's 5 days later. It's Thursday night. It's the night before he's going to the cross, Jesus. And it says, verse 3, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, confidence in his authority, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, security in his identity.
Yeah.
What did he do with that authority and security and confidence? Verse 4, rose from supper, laid aside his outer garment, taking the towel, tied it around his waist, and poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And then later, verse 13 or 12, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said, do you understand what I've done to you? To pause on that, because we think of foot washing, we have a very romantic view of it, right?
Yes.
We might have gone to like a reconciliation,
A wedding.
Here's where, and that's very symbolic. If you did at your wedding, it's very powerful. No shade there. But here's where it's a bit romanticized. First century Greco-Roman, what this position. So they would have someone dedicated. They would stand at the door, and when people would come into the house, they would take off their sandals and then they would wash their feet. And the position was so abased, so disgusting, that they wouldn't even let Jewish people do it.
Wow.
It had to be a Gentile dog to wash feet. Because what was on the feet? Okay, you're talking about walking around first century Rome. There's no plumbing, right? So what happened was when you used the restroom, not to get graphic, you'd fill in a bucket and you would throw it out the window onto the street. In addition to that, there was no cars, only animals. So in addition to just human waste on the street, there's the animal waste. Then there's no irrigation systems, and so when it rains, it all just creates a paste. I know it's disgusting, but that's where you got to get to with this, because we go, oh, so sweet. And then that paste cakes on your feet because they're wearing sandals.
Yeah.
No, this is real.
Yeah.
And so when men would walk into the house, there would be the lowest servant on the totem pole, not even a Jew, it couldn't even be a Jewish person. It had to be a Gentile dog, just so non-human. And they would get a towel and they would not gently wash, they would scrub that paste off of their feet. And so they walk into the upper room and there's not a bunch of servants there because it's just the disciples. And so they're sitting around. They're not sitting at a table like this. They're all reclining, kind of the floor. It's Middle Eastern culture. And they're all laying there and they eat. And then when they're finished, Jesus stands up knowing his authority. And instead of presenting himself to give this amazing presentation, instead of rallying the room behind his vision, they watch him stand up. They're all leaning on the floor. They got this cake on their feet. They watch him stand up, and he goes to the corner of the room, and he takes off his outer garment, and he puts on the towel of the Gentile dog servant that's hanging in the corner. And that's why Peter has such a visceral reaction.
Yeah.
He goes, "No!
Yeah.
That is so beneath you, not only as a leader, but you as a Jew. That's not your place."
Yeah.
And then he takes the water and he starts scrubbing the feet. This is not a gentle, like, here's a little wash for you. He takes time to scrub this excrement off the feet of the disciples. And Peter has this visceral reaction, like, this is disgusting, Jesus. Like, this is so beneath you as a leader.
Yes.
And he says, do you understand what I did to you? You call me teacher and Lord. Teacher is a very high, prominent position. Jewish rabbi is the word there. You call me rabbi and Kyrios, king. And you're right. I am that. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you an example.
Yeah.
I mean, that you should do just as I've done. Truly, truly, I say a servant is not greater than his master, or a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And Jesus not only gives us the value system in Matthew 20, Saturday as he's going up to Jerusalem, then he demonstrates it by using his authority, using his confidence, using his position to aim for the lowest place possible, the lowest position possible. And that's the offensive humility of leadership in God's kingdom.
Wow.
And catch this one, and then you can ask me questions. The next part of the verse, he finishes washing, he sits back down, and then he says, after doing these things, he says, truly, truly, one of you will betray me, and hands the cup to Judas, and Judas walks out. And Chris Carter said this about 5 years ago, and it's just like a lightning bolt. He said, Judas went out to betray Jesus with clean feet.
Yes.
In other words, Jesus didn't just serve the ones that could return,
that honored him,
that could bolster his position. He washed the feet of even those that would betray him.
He didn't.
Knowing that Judas was going to betray him, still scrubbed his feet and served even the ones who would betray him. And that, my friends, is the model of leadership in the kingdom. That's what it means when I say servant leadership. It doesn't mean just investing in everyone so you can have the ministry that does leadership development. Sure. Everybody can know you. It means you're going to lay yourself down and be committed to people's destinies, even when you know they're going to turn their back on you and betray you, and you still serve them.
Still bless them.
Why?
And cover them.
And you cover them, and you bless them, and you gently and joyfully wait to serve them again.
Oh.
Why? Because that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
And my model of leadership is not Elon Musk. It's Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's
right?
good.
And so
it's not even Nelson Mandela. You know what I mean? It's
not
one of the
Abraham
great,
Lincoln.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not. I'm not throwing shade at Elon.
Yes.
I don't really pay attention, to tell you the truth. So sorry if you're an Elon lover. The point is, all of those men are broken examples of Gentile lords over. Even Nelson Mandela, who demonstrated some Christ-likeness, but at the end of the day, Jesus is the example, and he's the one we're being conformed into the image of.
He is but a man. You know what I mean?
He's just a man.
Yes.
And so you take this, this paradigm of servant leadership, and then you go into New Testament ecclesiology, how the church works, and you see every leadership position is serving.
Yes.
Every leadership, the higher you go up, the more you serve, the more you exist to lay down your lives for others. What are pastors? They're shepherds. They're not CEOs. The reason why the business model of church doesn't work is because the church is not a business. It's a family that needs fathers, not a business that needs CEOs. God's not a CEO. He's a father. And so I think we need a paradigm shift, because what we're seeing right now, this is probably too simplistic, because there's 20 reasons why we're seeing just all of this leadership chaos and this sin in leadership. But some of it, I would venture to say a lot of it, is because there was a wrong paradigm of leadership in the first place. That position didn't exist to serve you and your platform. It existed for you to lay down your life for many and for the most vulnerable among you. And instead you used it to lord over. And in that environment, James 3, all kinds of evil and disorder kind of grows in that dark basement. And so for us who develop leaders, who are planting bases, who are pushing out into the frontier, if we're going to do that, then a non-negotiable for us has to be servant leadership. Right. And I've said this a couple of times to my leaders. I go, hey, if you don't want to lay down your life for your team and serve, I will remove you and put someone in place that will serve you, because I'm so committed to it that your gifting is secondary to me. Your heart to be a servant to those around you is primary for me in terms of what I'm looking for when we're putting leaders in place. Yeah,
I think the important thing is, I don't know, maybe it's not that important, but there is an environment that has to be created as well for leaders to actually become more like that Matthew 20 leader, right? Servant leadership. It's not you're not born into it. No. It's cultivated.
Yes.
Right. And as a person who is surrounded by people with a lot of gifting, a lot of raw talent, we just have incredible people with leadership their lives for sure. But just making sure that as much as possible, that before we put environments and bases under people, that we see servant leadership being cultivated in them. And I think the question is just not only to help us individuals to become and pursue this more, but how as a leader are you creating that space within MAPS Global?
That's a great question. So my first answer is to make much of Christ. It's actually not secondary is formation philosophies. The first way that I develop servant-hearted leaders is that in our culture, all eyes are on Jesus, right? If I'm the only model and I'm pointing to me as the only model, I'm going to dilute the servant leadership, because I'm broken, right? And I have bad days, and you see my bad days, right? But if we make much of Christ and he's at the center and all eyes are on him, then we're discipled by beholding him. So that's the first answer, is that we've built an environment where the presence of in person and the beauty of Jesus is at the center and all eyes are on him. And so we're being discipled by beholding his servant leadership. So then secondarily to that is the modeling of servant leadership. Because you only replicate what you are. You can teach till you're blue in the face, but you replicate on who you are. That's called fathering, right? And so you've got to become before you can build.
Sure.
And this is 101 to our leadership development. You have to become first, then you build, and then you lead. Most people want to jump to leading before they've become. And so a lot of what we focus on our leadership development on the front end is understanding yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your triggers, your family of origin, your personality strengths, all these things that you're bringing to the table, which if you're not self-aware of, you won't know that you'll have all these things you're bringing to the table that you don't know how to use to serve people. And so it can come out in all kinds of crazy ways, And so we really focus a lot on becoming and being self-aware so that you can serve people well. Many times, like this is a whole podcast to itself, but an unself-aware leader might walk into a room and think they're serving everyone, and really they're wounding everyone because they're completely they're completely not in touch with what it's like on the other side of them. Right. You know this. We've talked about this a lot. So all eyes on Jesus, number one. Number two, we as leaders are constantly creating feedback loops among our leadership team, and then we as leaders are working to be self-aware of our tendencies, our patterns, our insecurities. Right? If we can't be honest about our insecurities, then our insecurities are going to lash out at people, you know? So we got to be honest and self-aware of those things. We got to work through them. Number three, then we want to build a culture of high challenge, high support. I think this is a huge part of our leadership. High challenge, high support. It's a graph we use. We might be able to post it in the show notes, but it's basically a matrix. It's an x-axis and a y-axis like this, right? And there's basically four. Yeah, it's a quadrant. There's 4 quadrants, and a liberating servant leader who fights for the highest good of all those around them, and as a servant leader is a leader who provides both high challenge and high support. A servant leader is not just a leader that only provides support and no challenge. That creates entitlement. That creates mistrust. You ultimately don't trust a leader who only tells you how awesome you are.
Absolutely.
And if there's no challenge because the leader's insecure and just wants to be liked and wants everyone to feel good, that's actually not servant leadership. It's a leadership that's not committed to your destiny because they're not committed to your development. Well, on the opposite side, if it's all challenge and no support, those are the dominators, and that's a culture of fear and manipulation. You're just trying to perform to make the boss guy or gal happy because they're just going to constantly tell you what you're doing wrong. They're going to lash out at you. They're going to tell you you're missing it, but they're going to not give you any support on how to develop and grow. And that's the dominator as well. And then there's the abdicator, which is neither. Those are the serial entrepreneurs that just blow and go, and you don't even exist unless you're right there helping them. As soon as you leave the room, you might as well not even exist. And so we all, based on our self-awareness, we tend towards one of these things. No one tends towards liberating servant leader.
Interesting.
No one does. If you think you do, you're lying to yourself.
You're not self-aware.
Yeah, you're not self-aware. No one tends to that. You have to work to become that. And so it's back to becoming. And so we take a lot of time in our leadership development to teach people how to provide high challenge and high support. For the conflict averse leaders, they need to learn how to bring challenge. For the less empathetic human dynamic leaders who are just goal oriented, they need to learn how to bring some more support. And they get to servant leader, which is a leader who is secure in their authority, their position. They're not threatened by other leaders, and they're able to bring the appropriate amount of challenge and the correlating support in order to serve this person to carry them into their destiny. And so those are 3 things: all eyes on Jesus, becoming leaders yourself, and then learning how to bring high challenge, high support. And then, you know this, in our leadership environments. So whether it's we're on calls with our base leaders every other week. I'm in rooms with our directors here in environments every week. We're in prophetic meetings together. I'm always drip feeding leadership lessons. Yeah. Always. I'm always conscious of it with a leader. I'm always drip feeding and constantly investing in leaders, because ultimately I think what saves us from this, there's a lot of words out there right now, and there's a lot of angst about it, but putting the guy on the pedestal syndrome, there's a lot of words and phrases for that, but you know what I mean, like the one-man show, the personality cult. My wife, the other day, we were driving somewhere, and she turned to me and she said, "Maps is growing so quickly." She said, "What are you doing now to prevent that from happening to you?" I just, what a treasure to have a godly wife. Wow. And I said, "That's an amazing question." I said, there's probably 10 answers to that, but the one that's on my mind right now is, replicating leaders and distributing out leadership so it's not all on one person.
Yeah.
And that I father a family who fathers fathers and mothers who go lead their own families. And they're leading down in their families, and I'm just grandpa over here.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the father to every
Yes.
single person across the pathos
Yes.
of MAPS.
Yeah.
I'm raising up leaders who are servant leaders, and they're fathers and
Yeah.
mothers. And we already have that now. Like
Yes.
our bases in the Middle East, they're relating to our base director
Yes.
as that's the father of that
Right.
base, and I'm grandpa over here,
Yes.
right? And that's joyful to me. I don't have to be the biggest guy to everyone. And I think that it's culturally in our world that keeps us from the unchallengeable personality cult, man on a pedestal, man of God can do no wrong. I mean, we were laughing at this. I'll tell this because it's funny. We were at a culture meeting this morning. You were there. And I was chirping at Chris, and he was talking, and he said back to me, he goes, "Do you want a mic?" Right? And me and him, we're friends.
Yeah.
So I laughed because he was friending me,
Yeah.
but the room went,
Yeah.
and I went, "This is so good." They're watching another leader talk to the main leader like he's just another dude.
Yeah.
And it sounds so weird. I liked it,
Yeah.
you know. And I could feel everybody go like, "What's going to happen? Is Randy going to?" You know? and like there needed to be zero discussion after that because I already know Chris. He already knows me. I know
Yes.
exactly what he was saying.
Yes.
And I think by me not responding to that insecurity, like, "Oh my gosh, he called me out in front of everybody. What am I doing?" And go, I love this. This is great.
Yeah.
It takes the
Yes. And you even
magic off of me.
What I like
I
about
said the peanut gallery is now being
Yes,
silent. Yeah.
yes. And I think also what's beautiful about that moment is so often we hear from you, a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
The Chris is one of our main messengers for sure in our church family and even in our organization. But it's not often that you get to sit and enjoy a teaching from Chris or
Me.
even from Luke. Yes, you
Totally.
are.
I love it.
And so what was beautiful too is to see you enjoy, learn, and be enriched by the wisdom
I was
that is
eating
carried.
it up. His notes, I was just absorbing it.
So he was actually participating in the
Totally,
message,
yeah.
but he's so up close and so up
I was
front.
sitting on the
He was,
front row. Yeah.
which is something that's so beautiful. So I think I agree with you that there are leaders in our ethos that bring different, that add differently to what you add, but they in no shape or form threaten you as a leader. And
That's
you don't
exactly right.
there isn't any fear in you that this person is going to usurp me as the
Honestly,
main person.
There is not.
Yes.
I can say that with full integrity, which leads us to point 5. How do we build this in MAPS? And you know this. I'm constantly celebrating when other leaders do well or even better than me.
Yes.
I go, every time, first of all, it's completely sincere. Every time Chris preaches, I'm like discipled. I'm fathered, And you should see my notes. And when Luke talks, I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God, this guy's so smart. And then not only do I receive it, I celebrate it.
Yes.
Because what you celebrate will be what you create in the culture.
Yes.
And so I go out of my way, not in a weird flattery way, but in an honest, true, authentic way. I vocalize my appreciation of leaders who do. I'm gonna do the same with worship leaders. Every time a moment blows up in our program, I'm the first one on stage, high five and hugging. Going,
Yeah.
That was amazing. Because I have zero comparison or zero threaten to my worship leading. I'm secure.
Yes.
I know my limits. I know what I'm good at. I know what I can do. And so I'm so happy that there's others that are better than me at certain things. And we've got, to your point, such gifted leaders. What happens when the top guy does that, when he doesn't have to be the biggest, smartest, and most gifted person in the room, is that you open up a realm for creativity. And what happens is the repertoire of gifts. Do you like that? Repertoire.
Yes,
Do you
it's
like
French.
That? How about this? German. Smorgasbord.
Oh, wow. That sounds
Of
less sophisticated.
gifts?
Yeah.
And the measure of the magnet of gifted leaders will come to you when you don't have to be the biggest dude in the room and you just set your heart to serve them. All of a sudden you get something, I'll use a word, you get something apostolic there. when you get this gathering of leaders, when any of them, we have a dozen leaders that can all be leading their own churches right now. And yet they gather here. Why? Is because the culture is going to be celebrated and they're going to get invested in and they're going to be released into their destiny, because the top dude doesn't have any ambition to be the biggest guy.
Yes.
And I'm not saying this, look at me, but I am kind of saying like, well, this is what we're trying to model.
Right.
And you see this, you experience this.
Absolutely. So I think you say this often, and no matter how many times you say it, even now when you were saying it, it just never ceases to catch me off guard in a sense, which is Jesus is not insecure. He's
the most secure.
He is the most secure person, leader, friend. And I think just in many of the things that you've said in servant leadership, a huge aspect of that is working on the aspects of ourselves that might breed or that are insecure.
That's such a key. I mean, I think you're hitting on something. We're ending, but if I could wrap up what you're saying, you can't be a servant leader if you're harboring insecurity.
Right.
Because insecurity is pride. It's the other side of the coin of pride, and pride and servant leadership can't coexist.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like we're ending when it's getting good, but we're gonna end it there. You
want to hear my final statement here?
Yes, I would love
It's kind of sharp.
Okay, say
I'm reading.
Say, just drop it, and then we're gonna just close.
To leaders, building brands and empires with Jesus' name on it, but using intimidation, coercion, exaggeration, and manipulation that's fueled by selfish ambition, self-importance, and self-promotion. They're preaching a gospel of take over, take back, and take the highest seats of power, pursue the highest realms of influence. I ask you this, are you greater than your master? And are you wiser than your teacher? Or have you become your own master and a slave to the gods of wealth, power, and pride? There is no kind of leadership in the kingdom except for servant leadership. And if you signed up for something else, then you signed up to follow another Jesus. It's not the strong, the gifted, or the prophetic that will inherit the earth. It's the meek and the lowly.
Oh, that's powerful. We're going to end it right there.
Amen.
Amen. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the MAPS Global Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and check out previous episodes. Have you seen our 50 Hours documentary? Watch it now. And don't forget to sign up for our email newsletters.